The story starts that all of humanity was petrified. Then we'll see a few hours before. Taiju told his best friend Senku that he will confess his feelings to his crush Yuzuriha. Senku found it silly that he had been in love for 5 years and had no courage to confess his love to a Yuzuriha. He then showed Taiju a love potion which will help him, but Taiju refused. Taiju walked out, and Senku told the others that his love potion was just gasoline. After that, Yuzuriha was called under a tree, and she waited for Taiju. Then Taiju showed up, and he was nervous about admitting his feelings. Then Taiju started to confess his love, and Yuzuriha blushed. Before Taiju could confess his declaration of love, a green light appeared. The whole earth was enveloped in the green light, and all people became petrified. In the last moment, Taiju tried to protect his crush with all his power. After that, all people were petrified and the world plunged into chaos. The people could not move, but they were all still alive. Meanwhile, they could not see anything and everything was dark. Taiju tried to keep his consciousness, and he hoped that Yuzuriha is still alive. He didn't want to die because he hadn't gotten an answer from Yuzuriha yet. All men were petrified. Only the animals of the world were alive. Then several centuries passed, and the earth changed. The cities and civilization sank under tsunamis and world catastrophes. Taiju was still conscious and he didn't know how much time had passed. Several millennia passed and modern civilization disappeared from the face of the earth. One day, a liquid dripped onto Taiju's rock and he woke up. Taiju was able to break out of the rock and he was shocked. However, he discovered that humanity was petrified and everyone were turned into stone statues. Taiju was sad and prayed for the petrified people. After that, he spotted a river and he followed the direction of the river. Suddenly, Taiju remembered that in his past, 2 girls had found a petrified bird. He thought the bird was afflicted with a disease. As a result, Taiju took the bird to a vet to revive him. Suddenly, his crush Yuzuriha appeared. However, Yuzuriha also showed a petrified bird. She had the same stupid idea like Taiju. Taiju started laughing and they became good friends. Back in the present, Taiju found his school's old tree. He was happy to have found Yuzuriha and thanked the tree because Yuzuriha's statue was not destroyed. Taiju also thanked Yuzuriha because just thinking about her kept him sane and alive the whole time. Then Taiju was able to confess his love for Yuzuriha, and he cried because she couldn't answer him. After thousands of years, Taiju has successfully confessed his love. Suddenly, Taiju swore that he will revive her in the Stone Age. Also, he spotted a message for him and he immediately followed the river. Later, he met his best friend Senku, who was already waiting for his awakening. Taiju tried to hug him, but Senku didn't want to hug a naked guy and stopped him. Then Senku said that 3,700 years have passed, and Taiju couldn't believe he knew the exact date. Senku replied that he was constantly counting the seconds that had passed since the petrification. So Senku said he almost passed out while counting, but he managed to persevere. Taiju was impressed by his best friend Senku, and he was led to a shelter. When Senku showed Taiju his built home, he was shocked. Senku built the basics of survival from scratch on his own. However, Senku said he knew his feelings for Yuzuriha is stronger than anything else. In the days that followed, Senku tried to restore civilization with Taiju. Senku intended to recreate the world from scratch and save all humans. Then several days passed and Senku was exhausted by Taiju's collected resources. Senku immediately sorted out the poisonous foods and told him what is non-toxic. After that, they grilled Taiju's collected mushrooms and ate them. Taiju thanked him for the delicious meal because Senku produced salt to season it. Following this, he immediately went on looking for more food. Later he found grapes and he tasted the grapes, which were sour. Suddenly he saw the statue of the strongest primate high schooler named Tsukasa. Subsequently, Taiju discovered a basket in a cave and Taiju thought that another person had survived. Then Senku appeared and said he was the person who put the basket there. Senku said their ultimate goal is to free more humans from petrification. Then Senku explained that he tried to dissolve the petrification with nitric acid. Taiju didn't know what nitric acid was. However, Senku poured nitric acid on the bird, and his test failed. Senku was depressed, but he didn't give up and wanted to do more experiments to find a solution with his knowledge about science. Suddenly Taiju asked a stupid question, and Senku was happy. Senku explained to him that he wants to make a new mixture. So Taiju said he didn't understand most of it, but he showed him grapes to make alcohol. Followed Taiju showed his physical farming skills, and they were able to quickly produce their own wine. 3 weeks later they successfully made wine, and Taiju said that they aren't old enough to drink booze. Senku said that 3,700 years have passed, and now they are allowed to drink wine. After that, Senku planned to distill the alcohol, and he built a crazy vase. Senku believed in science, but his try failed. As a result, Senku tried more attempts to create distilled alcohol every day. Then winter came and they still had no success, but they didn't give up. Then spring came and Senku tested his miraculous fluidity again. Suddenly, Senku managed to create a mixture that dissolves the petrification. He then tested the mixture on a bird again, and they managed to find a solution through science. A bird got out of the petrification, and Taiju was happy to see their success. The bird flew in the sky, and Senku was glad, because they were getting a little closer to civilization. Following this, Taiju asked his friend who he planned to free from the petrification first. Senku immediately replied that Taiju is allowed to choose the first person that they will revive. Arrived at the statue of Yuzurihira, Taiju asked if the water could surely save Yuzurihira. After that, the time finally came when Taiju was able to save Yuzurihira. Suddenly he realized that she is naked during her awakening. Taiju hurt Senku's eyes and he was annoyed with his stupid friend. Taiju insisted on carrying her back to the base first and putting clothes on her. Suddenly, Senku heard animal noises deep in the forest. Then a lion appeared, and they were stunned. Senku said the lions most likely escaped from a zoo. They then jumped off a cliff thinking they had escaped the lions. So Senku and Taiju tried to escape from the lion, but more lions appeared. Taiju ran away and he chose to sacrifice himself to protect his friend. He wanted his friend Senku to survive with Yuzurihira. Senku said that he shouldn't say such nonsense, and they will both find a solution. However, he stopped Taiju, and Senku knew that Taiju is a good person who always protects others without taking care of himself. Senku and Taiju kept running, and Taiju came up with a plan. Senku decided to revive Tsukasa, and he apologized to Yuzurihira for his decision. Then he poured the miracle water on the statue of Tsukasa. The lions surrounded them, but Tsukasa was revived in time and saw the lions. Senku immediately reported the situation to him, and Tsukasa was ready for the fight. Tsukasa then attacked the lions with stones and he hit them with his fists. Tsukasa was able to knock the lion leader unconscious with just one punch. Then the other lions were intimidated, because Tsukasa was stronger than Mike Tyson. Suddenly, Tsukasa said that they never have to be afraid of wild animals again. Suddenly, Senku said that Tsukasa is a double-edged sword, because maybe through greed, he could become a tyrant. Taiju was afraid, and he imagined Yuzurihira being seduced by Tsukasa. Followed, Tsukasa asked for a tool to cut the lion's meat. Senku told him that lion meat doesn't taste good, and got a sour taste. However, Tsukasa replied that he will eat the lion's meat to pay his respects for taking a life. Taiju was happy that Tsukasa is a kind person, so Senku gave him a knife and he agreed to him eating that precious meat despite the disgusting taste. Later, Taiju promised that they would produce more miracle water and she would be revived next. Meanwhile, Tsukasa was surprised by Senku, and they all got to know each other better. Subsequently, Tsukasa learned that they have no meat, and he immediately went hunting in the forest. Tsukasa found wild boars, and he defeated them all with ease. In addition, Tsukasa also caught a bird while flying in the sky. Then he went hunting fish in the sea with just a spear, and caught with his monster power many fish. Taiju was impressed by Tsukasa with his Stone Age skills. Tsukasa then said that as a team member, he promises to always provide enough meat so they can eat well. Suddenly, Tsukasa smashed a rock to save a statue of a young woman. Taiju was glad that Tsukasa is a kind person and thought he is a saint. Following this, they ate the grilled fish, and Senku asked them a question. Taiju tried to find the solution and his answer was incorrect. Senku was shocked at his stupidity, and Tsukasa tried his luck. Then Senku resolved the answer and said they need calcium carbonate for their next goal. As a result, Taiju was asked to collect many shells for crafting. Taiju collected a large amount of shells and crushed it into white powder. Senku intended to use the ground calcium carbonate for many works, so Senku produced a kind of cement and he also created soap in the Stone Age world. Senku became Dr. Stone and he gained the respect of Tsukasa. Tsukasa praised Senku, and Senku became suspicious at his words. Then Tsukasa replied that he had no ill intentions. Suddenly Taiju appeared and he interrupted their conversation. He asked about other uses for the shell. In the night, Taiju was sleeping and Tsukasa noticed that Senku is outside of the hut. Meanwhile, Senku built a crossbow to provide security. The next morning, Tsukasa said that the stone world is great, because sea and land have no owner. After that, He told a story that once a poor boy tried to make a necklace out of seashells for his little sister. Suddenly a man with fishing rights beat up the boy and called him a thief. Then Tsukasa destroyed a human statue. Senku said he had just killed a human. Followed Tsukasa asked if he wanted to save all the people including the adults with the corrupted souls. Then Tsukasa said that adults will destroy the world again, and he got the plan to create a world ruled without greed. Then Tsukasa tried to destroy another statue. Senku stopped him and said he will save everyone in the world. Also he planned to bring back civilization. Following this, Senku and Tsukasa became enemies and each pursuing different goals. Senku knew that Tsukasa is crazy and they have to be careful that Tsukasa doesn't get to the miracle water. Suddenly, Taiju appeared, and he was happy to have collected enough miracle water to revive Yuzuhira. Senku had no choice, and he chose to show Tsukasa the effects of the miracle water. However, Taiju was happy to save his crush, but Senku said they didn't have enough miracle water. Taiju wanted to go collecting more, but he was stopped by Tsukasa. Senku already suspected that Tsukasa would immediately try to get information about the source of the miracle water. Thus, in Tsukasa's absence, Senku planned to complete the mixture to create the miracle water. Meanwhile, Tsukasa found out that the miracle water is nitric acid. Then we see Senku again, and he explained to Taiju that Tsukasa's ideals are wrong, so Taiju trusted his best friend's words. Later he learned that Tsukasa is a good person, but also a killer at the same time. After that, Taiju wasn't ready to pour the miracle water over Yuzuhira, so Senku poured the water over his crush. Then the rock didn't break off from her body. Senku explained to him that the reaction takes time because the molecules are connected. Taiju didn't understand anything, but he waited until Yuzuhira's rock shell shattered. As a result, Taiju remembered the time before he could finish his confession of love. He waited several thousands of years and was finally able to confess his feelings to Yuzuhira again. After all this time, Yuzuhira was alive again, and she was caught by Taiju. Taiju calls her name and he apologizes to her. Then Yuzuhira replied that she was still asleep and thanked him for saving her. Following this, Senku interrupted their reunion and he said they had to choose between two options. So Senku said Tsukasa was on his way back and they would face him as an enemy. Taiju and Yuzuhira decided to help Senku fight against Tsukasa. Suddenly, Tsukasa appeared and he was determined to impose his ideals on the world. Then Taiju saw that Tsukasa had killed a human. He decided to stop Tsukasa, but Senku knew Taiju didn't stand a chance. Senku shot Tsukasa with an arrow, but he easily deflected it. Then he also attacked Taiju, who was able to block his strong kick. Tsukasa noted that Taiju isn't willing to use violence at all. Taiju made a statement that he would avoid violence and offered Tsukasa to vent his anger on him. Yuzuhira and Senku were shocked by Taiju his stupid words. Meanwhile, Tsukasa was confused and overwhelmed by Taiju's stupid logic. Then Tsukasa asked what he would do if he killed Yuzuhira. Suddenly Taiju's head was bleeding, and he passed out. Tsukasa knew that Senku and his friends are not his enemies, but they had different opinions and he said goodbye. Then Senku woke up Taiju and he knew how tough his best friend is. Taiju got up immediately and he said he was fit again. After waking up, he immediately wanted to stop Tsukasa from murder more humans. Then Senku said that they can only stop Tsukasa with the power of science. This is how the war between science and the Stone Age started against each other. Senku actually planned to build a weapon against Tsukasa. After that, Senku wanted to go gathering materials. So they set off, and on their way, cherry blossoms fell from the trees. Senku said that these are a new species of cherry trees that are no longer from their old world. Following this, they were on top of a mountain and Senku pulled a homemade tool out of his pocket. He determined the distance of their destination to the meter. Suddenly, Yuzuhira spotted something in the distance. So they all followed Yuzuhira through the forest. Then they found a Buddha statue that they remembered from their old lives. Yuzuhira then recalled her childhood when she went to visit the Buddha statue with her family. Yuzuhira cried tears of joy, and Taiju thought he did something wrong. The reason Yuzuhira cried was that she just woke up recently, and the memories of the old world made her emotional. Following this, Senku and Taiju cheered her up. Taiju said that they found Buddha, and he will show them the way. Meanwhile, Senku realized that the statue is made of bronze, which is very useful for his plan. So he planned to destroy the statue to take the valuable materials with him. In the following days, they gathered many useful materials and ate stews together. At night, Taiju wanted to protect them, but Senku told him to rest. The next morning, Senku was on a raft with Yuzuhira and Taiju was their human engine. Suddenly he noticed that Yuzuhira's foot is still petrified. so Taiju decided to use the miracle water to break the petrification. After that, they went further, and he said that they will soon reach their goal. Meanwhile, Tsukasa found the tracks of Senku's group. He immediately realized it was just a trap. Then Tsukasa suspected that Senku's plan is to build a weapon with science to defeat him. In the evening, they arrived at their destination, and Senku said that they can start to create a strong weapon with his knowledge about science. Senku wanted to build a gun. He said that they will now advance through time and use gunpowder to create new high-tech weapons. Then we see Senku again. He mined the volcano's rock and said they can start making a weapon against Tsukasa. In the followed night, Taiju wanted to talk about his confession 3,700 years ago, because back then, he couldn't confess his love for her in time. Yasuhira wanted to know what he wanted to say back then. Taiju replied that since he was petrified, he has something important to confess to her. Unfortunately, they must first bring civilization back. Following this, Taiju said that together they will bring back civilization, and then he will confess his true feelings to her. On the next morning, Senku had mined enough ingredients for gunpowder, and he wanted to start to create a weapon that can withstand Tsukasa, so Yasuhira then added sulfur to the bag. Second, Senku added the collected charcoal. Finally, Senku had taken nitric acid from the miracle cave. Then Senku mixed his materials in a hive and he added dextrose to it. When Senku finished shuffling, Taiju went to help him, but Yasuhira stopped him. Senku said the stone will not cause an explosion. Senku explained why, but he made a mistake. As a result, the gunpowder caught fire, and they narrowly escaped the blast. Despite the failure, Senku was happy because they didn't lose any body parts while experimenting. Senku could make a dangerous weapon, and he was planning to make a deal with Tsukasa. The reason about his decision to make a deal is that Senku was sure Tsukasa is not a bad person, because he didn't got the intent to kill them. Senku was confident that they could find a peaceful solution, but he was aware that if the deal failed, he would have to wipe out Tsukasa. After that, they put out the fire, and Yasuhira saw smoke rising in the forest. Senku was shocked by the smoke signals, and he was sure it wasn't Tsukasa. He suspected someone was responding to their smoke signals. Senku came to the conclusion that other people lived in the stone world. Senku didn't want to put out their fire so they could attract the attention of the strangers. Unfortunately, they would also show Tsukasa their location, and they didn't know what to do next. Meanwhile, Tsukasa was on his way to find Senku. He suspected that Senku was smart enough to create gunpowder in the stone world. Suddenly, Tsukasa spotted the smoke signals from Senku's group on the mountain. As Yasuhira gathered firewood, Tsukasa appeared behind her. He took Yasuhira as his hostage, and Senku was aware that Tsukasa had become scared. He admitted that he can't stand against the weapons of the old world. After all the actions of Senku, Tsukasa was willed to kill anyone who didn't conform to his ideals. Tsukasa threatened Senku that he would kill Yasuhira if he didn't stop making weapons from the old world. Senku lied to him and said that he doesn't care about Yasuhira's life. Tsukasa knew he was a good person and he would never betray his friends. Tsukasa said that he is a smart person, but he would never sacrifice other people. After that, Tsukasa was sure he had won. Suddenly, Yasuhira said that she is ready to die. She wanted to sacrifice her life so that Senku could save humanity. Senku was touched by Yasuhira's words, and he began to reveal the secret of the miracle water to Tsukasa. Meanwhile, Taiju collected firewood and he detected more smoke signals from the unknown people. Taiju immediately wanted to go back and report his friends about the great news. Then we see an unknown girl answering the smoke signals of Senku. Following this, Tsukasa let Yasuhira alive and offered Senku to give up his plan, because otherwise he would die by Tsukasa's hand. So Tsukasa didn't want to kill Senku if he promised to quit science. Suddenly, Senku remembered his childhood at school. Senku said to the teacher that he will travel to space. At that time he was still young and he studied every day in order to get a lot of knowledge one day. Followed, his father sold his car because he wanted that Senku had enough equipment to research more about the world. After that, Senku started his scientific research. The older Senku got, the crazier his projects got. One day bullies tried to destroy Senku's built machine, but Taiju tried to protect Senku. Senku was angry and built a weapon with science. He attacked the bullies on the followed day and they received their punishment. A few days later, Senku befriended with Taiju and Taiju helped him with his crazy experiments. At some point, Senku tried to build a small rocket that exploded immediately. Senku did not give up and he continued to research science. Then we see Senku in the lab and Taiju wanted to give him a present. Yasuhira made 3 dolls for his rocket project. He then started another rocket test and his rocket flew into the sky. Senku's rocket exploded when he arrived at space. Then he told his friends that his rocket attempt was a success. When Senku finished thinking about his past, Tsukasa said he didn't want to kill him, so he asked him again if he was willing to give up science. Senku declined his offer because he couldn't give up his passion. Tsukasa replied that he will end his life quickly and painlessly with one clean attack. Meanwhile, Taiju had a strange feeling and immediately ran to the volcano. Before Senku was killed, Tsukasa said that if they had met earlier, they would have definitely become good friends. Senku agreed. Tsukasa then attacked Senku, and he broke Senku's neck with his sword. After the final blow, Tsukasa realized that if they had met in childhood, they would have become good friends. He wishes he had met Senku in the old world before they went to the stone world. Below, we see Senku, who is no longer alive, and Taiju didn't manage to save his best friend in time. Taiju and Yuzurihira cried for their beloved friend Senku. Taiju couldn't believe he died, and he didn't want to accept his death. Then Tsukasa said that they should bury their friend properly. Farewell. Taiju was furious, and Tsukasa sensed his lust for murder immediately. He knew that Taiju in rage could fight him. He hoped Taiju would keep calm, so he wouldn't have to kill him. When Taiju lifted a huge rock, Tsukasa was ready for a battle against Taiju. Taiju was angry and sad at the same time, but Yuzurihira managed to calm him down. She said that Senku sacrificed his life to protect her. Then Taiju threw the rock in the air to distract Tsukasa. Tsukasa was confused and tried to figure out their plan. Meanwhile, Yuzurihira tried to get the gunpowder. She believed in Senku's dream and she threw the gunpowder at Tsukasa. Then Tsukasa destroyed the pot full of black powder. Taiju and Yuzurihira have promised to fight together against Tsukasa with the help of science. Following this, Taiju was ready to defeat Tsukasa with whatever means they had. When the giant rock landed, the rock created sparks that immediately exploded. Tsukasa was hit by the blast and he couldn't see through the smoke. We then see Tsukasa, and he was unharmed by the blast. He suspected that Taiju's plan was to escape from him. Then Taiju ran away with his dead friend, hoping to save his best friend Senku. Tsukasa was sure that Senku could not be revived in this world. Meanwhile, Taiju tried to revive him with a heart massage. Senku showed no reaction, and he planned to do the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. In that moment, Yuzurihira said it's her fault that Senku sacrificed himself to save her life. Following this, Taiju remembered a question from school. At that time, Senku said that he will always try to save everyone with science. Taiju was sure that Senku would never sacrifice himself without a plan. Suddenly, Yuzurihira remembered that Senku drew attention to his neck before he died. Then Taiju realized why he was always touching his neck. As a result, they found that Senku's neck was still petrified. They immediately understood Senku's plan to revive himself. They then used the remaining miracle water and poured it over Senku's neck. After the petrification was gone, Senku's friends hoped he would be revived. Taiju yelled at him, saying that he needs to wake up to achieve his dreams. He knew that Senku was their last hope to rebuild civilization. Then we see the Earth from space, and a single person counted all the seconds since petrification. Senku was petrified, but he tried to stay conscious. When Senku still couldn't see after 3,700 years, he hoped to be able to see something again. Suddenly the petrification was dissolved from his body. Senku was glad to be free of the rock, and was finally able to move again. Then Senku immediately started researching the petrification. Suddenly, monkeys appeared, who were scared on Senku's body because he saw a human for the first time. Senku was also surprised because he had discovered a new species of monkey. After that, Senku looked around and set his plan to rebuild civilization. Senku knew the exact time that had passed so far, and he carved the exact date on a tree. However, Senku was already looking forward to his goal of saving the whole world with the help of science. Then Senku tried to make a fire, and the monkeys thought that Senku is stupid. In the evening, Senku realized that he doesn't have enough strength or skill like his friends to make a fire. He didn't give up, and knew he had to create fire with his knowledge of science. Subsequently, Senku smashed many stones to find a solution to his problem. He tried to find the right type of stone to achieve his goal. Senku failed trying to make tools, but he didn't give up. He knew that, like in his old life, he had to experiment a lot and find a way to solve his problem. He was then able to build stone tools that helped him solve his problems. Then he ties tree roots together into a rope. In the evening, Senku tried to create a fire again with his manufactured cord. However, Senku generated heat into the night, and he combined it with oxygen. As a result, Senku successfully created fire in the stone world. In the weeks that followed, he cut down trees for a shelter. Also, Senku tried to hunt meat, but he didn't have enough stamina. Senku was aware that he had no special physical powers, so he came up with a new plan to hunt animals. Senku was able to solve all his problems with science, and he caught a deer. In the months that followed, he ate the meat he killed. Additionally, he built new inventions every day to advance science. After several months, Senku managed to create a shelter with all the necessary infrastructure. Following this, Senku looked down on the monkeys, and he was already looking forward to saving the world one day. A few weeks later, Senku collected mushroom, and he finished the construction work. Suddenly, he fell over from exhaustion, and he wished for a person who would do the physical work. On the next morning, he dug up a stone statue because he planned to revive his best friend first. He became sentimental when he saw his best friend's face and looked forward to his revival after 3,700 years. He then tried to figure out how to revive his friend and came up with the multiple causes of the petrifications. Number 1 was that aliens purified them with a super alien petrification beam. Number 2 was that the military created a crazy weapon which got out of control. The last hypothesis was that a new coronavirus caused the petrification of the world. After that, Senku tried to figure out the rules of petrification, using a bird as his first test subject. He pondered the solution to why he came out of the petrification and suspected it had something to do with a natural spring. Suddenly he noticed something and recalled the moment he was revived. Senku got a great idea and remembered that the fragments closest to his head were on the ground in a pile. Following this, he found a cave, and he smelled in the cave nitric acid. Senku used the hair of his neck, which was still petrified, and he held it under the dripping mixture. Senku waited for a result, and his experiment was a big success. Following this, he poured a bottle of the mixture over the statue of his best friend. He hoped that Taiju is still alive, but his first try failed. So he began with many experiments and realized the mixture wasn't working on humans. In the following days, he thought about the situation and found the missed puzzle to his final success. He understood E=mc², and was sure Albert Einstein is the solution for his problem. Then Senku started to grind, and he was sure to find the solution. He built a laboratory and made many experiments in his little hut. After many weeks, he was able to create a solution and tried to awake his best friend. Finally, Senku found the formula for his solution, and he waited for his friend to wake up. Back in the present, Taiju believed, like Senku a few months before, that his best friend will revived. So he hoped for a miracle, and he knew Senku is one of the person who didn't give up. As a result, the storm clouds passed and it stopped to rain. Suddenly, Taiju looked to the sky and heard Senku's voice. Then they were glad to see him alive. Senku trusted that his friends would notice the petrification on his neck. Taiju was glad that he was alive, and he almost crushed his entire body. However, Senku thanked them for reviving him, and Yuzuhira cried tears of joy. After that, she thought the pattern of a sheet looked like a rocket, and she said it will look good on Senku. Senku then said his self-sacrificing human experiment was a success, but he was surprised about the restorative effects of undoing petrification. Taiju said, maybe this petrification is the stone of life that replaces doctors for them. Senku realized from Taiju's words that he is right, and the phenomenon really becomes like a Dr.Stone, who heal all injuries. They then covered their tracks, and Yuzuhira wondered if they could revive the broken statues. Senku replied he tried it before, but it didn't work. Suddenly he had a great idea and knew he could only entrust the mission to Yuzuhira. She accepted his mission, and Taiju also wanted to know the secret between the two of them. So Yuzuhira told him they should go to see Tsukasa, but Taiju shocked about her words, and he was very confused about her decision. Senku explained him that Tsukasa thinks he is in the afterlife. In addition, he told them to infiltrate Tsukasa's empire as spies, and he gave Yuzuhira the details about the mission. He said Tsukasa intends to use the miracle water to amass an army of young people to make a new world, but Senku got the plan to make an army with science to fight against him. As a result, Senku planned to find allies for a scientific revolutionary army, and he sent his friends to infiltrate Tsukasa. Yuzuhira was surprised that they both are so casual about his plan. Taiju replied that Senku is always logical, and he realized they won't be seeing each other for a long time. So Taiju ran back, and he knew his voice won't reach him. Taiju showed a sign that symbolized his friendship. Following this, Senku said goodbye, and he showed his best friend the flag of science. In the meantime, Tsukasa noticed that someone was following him. Suddenly, a cute girl with blonde hair appeared, and she brought him flowers. He wondered if she was a person revived by Taiju. Suddenly, she attacked Tsukasa, and he dodged her attack. Tsukasa was attacked by the blonde girl, and he understood she isn't a revived person because her martial arts skills are insane. Then Kohaku said she saw all his evil deeds that he had done on the mountain. She thought he was an evil sorcerer and tried to kill Tsukasa with her Stone Age knife. He dodged her attack, and he understood that she didn't know what an explosion is. However, Tsukasa found out that she belongs to a new generation who didn't know about science. He didn't see primitive humans as a threat and had no reason to fight Kohaku. His goal was to return to the cave and claim the miracle water before they do. So Tsukasa said goodbye and just pushed her back. Then we see Senku. He heard the loud noise and immediately ran in the direction. Kohaku was surprised to see Senku, but he said she should stop talking and he tried to save her. Following this, Senku said he got two options, but one of them is very dangerous. She replied her organs and bones are fine. Senku was glad she wasn't hurt, and he used his knowledge of science to save her safely. Kohaku was surprised about his construction, and he explained that he will use science to save her. At the end of the day, Senku successfully managed to save her, and Kohaku was impressed by the power of science. Following this, Kohaku said she got a liking on him, and Senku misunderstood her words. In the evening, Senku noticed that Kohaku slept with her swords. She replied, she liked the way he live, but she don't trust him yet. Senku said he wouldn't dare attack a lioness and told her to relax. So Kohaku learned about Senku's rude behavior, but she knew he is a good person. As a result, she offered him to help him fighting against Tsukasa. He told Kohaku about his plan, and Kohaku decided to team up with Senku. In the followed morning, Kohaku told Senku she needs the hot water to make a hot spring bath for healing purposes. Senku made fun of her again, and she replied, the hot water is for her big sister. Senku learned her sister was seriously ill, and he understood that she loves her big sister, because she brought the heavy jar to her village every day. Suddenly, Kohaku slipped, but Senku saved her in time and told her to hand it over. Senku couldn't handle the heavy jar and built a car to transport it. So Kohaku was impressed by his invention. Suddenly, they crashed into a tree, and Kohaku managed to survive unharmed, while Senku lay injured on the ground. Then he saw the village of Kohaku, and he was surprised to see many people. Senku couldn't believe to see the villager. Also, he thought the village is a settlement of revived people, and he realized there is no sign of a revival fluid. Suddenly he was attacked, but Kohaku protected Senku. Jinro and Kinro didn't allow Senku to enter the village. They said the rules didn't allow outsiders to enter the village because they are all criminals. Suddenly Kohaku asked them if they want to fight against her, but they knew Kohaku would beat them up. As a result, Senku tried to convince them without violence, and he showed them soap bubbles. Kinro and Jinro were fascinated, and Senku planned to use science to win them over to his side. Suddenly Jinro knew he needs to use his special technique and decided to let someone else handle the problem. He got the intention to find his friend Chrome. Chrome introduced himself and said he is a super smart sorcerer. Following this, Senku introduced himself and told them that he is a scientist. Senku was surprised about Chrome because he wasn't scared like his friends. Suddenly Chrome said no one will beat him in sorcery, and he accepted Chrome's challenge. After that, Chrome showed him a fire, and Jinro was the only one who thought they will start a dangerous sorcerer battle. Followed, Chrome said he will show them his rainbow bridge, so Chrome threw something into the fire and he turned the fire yellow. Kohaku and the boys were impressed to see his fire turning into many different colors, but Senku knew it's just a flame test reaction. Chrome couldn't believe that Senku knew about his trick, and he thought Senku could read his mind. As a result, his plan failed and he tried to justify himself to Kohaku. Chrome went to his laboratory, and he created with a ball electricity. He scared his friend with the electricity, and Jinro thought he attacked him with his sorcerer skills. Then Senku saw his ball of sulfur, and he was surprised that Chrome managed to create that ball of sulfur. He got a liking of Chrome, and he showed Chrome the true power of his ball. So Senku paralyzed Chrome with his own trick, and he fainted out. Kohaku asked him about the trick, and Senku gave them the ball of sulfur. Following this, Senku looked at his treehouse and was amazed, because he collected all minerals and scientific materials by himself. Chrome replied he collected everything and called the reactions sorcery. In that moment, Senku smiled, because he found a guy who got the potential to become a good scientist. However, Chrome challenged him to a last duel, but he had no chance of beating Senku on a math question. Following this, Senku got his shed of science and Chrome joined his team. He discovered all of Chrome's treasures and they became good friends. Later, Kohaku let the two boys play with the rocks, and Senku got the plan to convince the two brothers with science. Then Senku sticked his spear into the fire, and he successfully created a golden spear. Kinro said he can't buy him off with this nonsense. Following this, they noticed that Kinro liked his new gift and Ginro was jealous. Later, Senku discovered that Chrome collected plants. Chrome said he collected them because he tried to find a solution to cure Ruri's disease. This was the reason that Chrome decided to become a sorcerer. In the meantime, Ruri thanked her little sister for bringing her hot water for her illness. Ruri's servants learned that Kohaku slept a night in the forest. Followed, Ruri asked them to leave for a second. They refused and said they couldn't let the priestess be on her own. Ruri convinced them to leave, and she was worried about Kohaku and knew something happened yesterday. Suddenly, Ruri collapsed, and she told Kohaku not to put herself in danger for her. After that, we see Chrome, who asked Senku if he could use science to cure Ruri's disease. Following this, Chrome learned about the modern civilization and all inventions of the old world. He told Chrome about the petrification and the disaster of the world 3,700 years ago. As a result, Chrome began to cry and couldn't believe that someone destroyed the modern civilization. Chrome was angry, but Senku cheered him up and said humanity isn't going down that easily. Then Chrome decided to build a nation of science with him, and he intended to defeat Ruri's sickness with the power of science. Senku smiled by hearing his words, and he planned to make antibiotic in the Stone Age world. In the followed day, Jinro told the villagers about Senku, and they didn't saw him as their enemy. Then the village chief learned about the foreigner, who was brought by Kohaku. He got angry because he disowned his daughter, and she still doesn't obey the rules. Suddenly, Ruri's illness got worse, and she collapsed. In the meantime, Senku planned with his friends to save Ruri. But Senku had ulterior motives, and wanted to make all the villagers his workers. Following this, Senku told them the Kingdom of Science will produce antibiotic, which saved 100 millions of humans. Kohaku and Chrome were motivated to help Senku, and they told him to start right away. Senku explained them, there are 2 routes to making antibiotics. Senku tried to explain the theory, but they didn't understand anything and let Senku do the planning. Then he said he will able to produce antibiotics with 10 billion%. As a result, Senku planned the steps to make their miracle medicine, and he showed his friends the plan. They were shocked to see his complicated plan, but believed that Senku would pull it off. Chrome got excited and asked Senku about his plan to create iron. After that, Senku taught Chrome more about the world, and he was exhausted to be a teacher. Chrome was glad to learn about gravity and the space. So Senku told them about the space, and he showed them the North Star. Suddenly he noticed that the positions of the stars had changed, and he realized the Earth's axis is shifting. He understood that the whole planet has tilted slightly over the past 3,700 years, and the North Star moved. Chrome thought he knew more than Senku for the first time and showed him a magic stone. But Senku destroyed his self-confidence and told him that his rock is a magnet. A few days passed, and they went to a river to find more magnet rocks. Kohaku found many of the black sand, and Senku looked forward to produce iron in the Stone Age world. Later, Senku learned that Kohaku was the only woman with gorilla abilities, and she was angry at being called a gorilla. Subsequently, Chrome had the idea to ask the village for help, but Kohaku said nobody would help, because they are both suspicious sorcerers. Suddenly a watermelon appeared out of nowhere, and Kohaku knew the girl. Senku was surprised that her name is Suika, and she got the intention to help them. Chrome saw the iron sand, and she said she couldn't never make herself useful. As a result, she asked Senku if she could help him by searching the iron sand. Senku was grateful about her help, and he counted on Suika to find more iron sand. She was surprised about Senku, who was the first person to not ask her about the watermelon on her head. Following this, Senku wondered that they knew about legends of his old life, so they told Senku that Ruri told them about the story about Momotaro. In addition, Kohaku said she heard all kinds of stories from her big sister. Senku was interested in Ruri, and he decided to cure her illness with all cost. Suddenly Chrome got jealous, and he found out that Chrome had a crush on her. After a few days they collected enough iron sand, and Senku told them the next step. Senku explained they will burn it with the highest temperature. So Kohaku asked him about his plan, and Senku showed his self-made Stone Age oven. Kohaku was motivated to see Senku's new tool. Then they started to generate air with Senku's tool. Senku told them that they only need to last 20 to 30 more hours so they can make iron. In the evening, Jinro saw the fire and had the idea to help Senku, but Kinro said they need to follow the rules. Jinro was jealous about his golden spear, and they started arguing. In the followed morning we see Senku realized he needs more manpower to make iron. Senku and Chrome got the idea to bait Jinro with science, and Kohaku said they should stop calling it bait, Then Suika said she will find out what they need to recruit the villagers. As a result, they trusted Great Detective Suika with the important mission to find out the villagers' desires. Later, Suika went to the village, and everyone knew about Senku living in the shed of chrome. Suika gathered a lot of information about the villagers and she went back to report Senku. In the evening, Suika told them that the dazzling sister wished to find a handsome boyfriend. Senku knew it's impossible to create a handsome boyfriend with science. Then Chrome called Kohaku a gorilla, and he was punished by Kohaku, who doesn't like his words. After that, Suika reported to Senku that the boy Ganon was sick to eat fish every day. Senku had a great idea and said he could already see the scientific bait that would got them to his side. Meanwhile, Suika played with a dog, and Senku noticed about her toy. Suika told Senku the dogtail millet is Chalk's favorite toy. The next morning, Senku harvested foxtail millet and said they would make gourmet survival food from scratch. Kohaku passed to eat foxtail millet and didn't understood his plan. So Senku explained Kohaku that foxtail millet is 10 billion% a grain. Followed, they processed the grain and mixed it with water. So Senku told his friends that they successfully made wheat flour and they celebrated. Afterwards, he started the final step and mixed the flour with eggs to cook it with fresh ingredients. Senku cooked a feast with high-quality meat, and his friends smelled his soup. As a result, Senku said they called his noodle soup ramen. Chrome tried the ramen as the first one, and he was overwhelmed by the delicious taste. However, Kohaku and Suika taste the noodle soup too, and they couldn't believe that such a thing would exist in the world. Then Senku tasted his cooked ramen and he was disgusted. Later they went to the village, and Senku intended to bait all villagers with his ramen. All villagers smelled his dish, and Kohaku told Senku that he looks like a villain.